It's you liberals who have lifted them up, Howard.
Paul, you conservatives make a mistake. You can't afford to strangle hope in people. Without hope, people become dangerous.
No, Howard. You liberals have let them invade our society. You give them jobs, political jobs.
Paul, you missed the point. It's only the smart ones we move up.
That makes it even worse.
No, we have to move them up. If we leave a smart one in the ghetto, he might develop into a leader against us. But if we raise him up into white society, we neutralize him. He feels compelled to try to act like us. He loses his identity and his racial anger, if he has any. He becomes alien to his brothers. They realize he sold them out, and they grow to hate him. He becomes worthless to them and safe for us. No, thank you. In fact, in his love for the creature comforts, except for his color, he's become one of us.
Are we hot, Sean?
Yes.
And happy Monday to all of you. Thank you so much for tuning in to Feedback, a positive image production by Hood Research. My name is Theo Brun, co-founder of Hood Research, and my co-host,
The BD, and we welcome you to the program.
Thank you so much. I want to say good morning. Good morning, and so many of you who tune in with us each Monday. Good morning to Vera and to Ron and to Barbara and to Errol, and I can't forget Jay Henderson all the way over on the east side, and to Tom, and to Val, and so many of you who help to support this program. And thank you to those who do. And for those of you who are considering supporting the program, please make your check or money order out to Hood Research, or if you prefer, you can make it out to WHPR Broadcasting Company. We have no objection to that. But we would ask that you mail it to Hood Research at P.O. Box 4416, Detroit, Michigan 48204. Again, please mail it to Hood Research at P.O. Box 4416, Detroit, Michigan 48204. And Tabidi, you have some new viewers you want to say good morning to.
Yes, we say we greet Gwen Renee, Frida Washington, Brother Smith Bay, Brother Shane, and Jackie. That's a mom and son duo who watches us, and they are very politically active. I gotta love them for that, as well as Ruth Ann and Jackie. And as I always say, have your friends, neighbors, co-workers, and family tune in and have pen and paper ready for valuable information you may want to record.
Absolutely, and I have to add Roy McAllister, Les Little, and we have some lifetime members of Hood Research, so we have to say good morning to them as well. We have with us this morning as our guest a gentleman who has been with Hood Research before, and he comes to us from Channel 7, WXYZ, and that's none other than Chuck Stokes. And thank you so much for coming in to be with us this morning.
It is an absolute pleasure being with both of you, and thank you for asking me, getting my week off to a good start.
Hey, I like the way that sounds. There are so many things that are taking place around the world, and I guess I'd like to start on a national tip. I heard that there's a local reporter who said, well, I guess Republican, or he probably would not have said this, that Hillary Clinton, it's just ridiculous that she's going around on a book tour. What's ridiculous about it? I mean, it just made no sense to me.
I agree with you, Theo. It is so common for prominent people, regardless of what profession you're in, that when you've done something that is of the interest to the general public, and you have time to sit down and write your memoirs, there's always going to be somebody out there interested in reading it.
Right.
And some will like it, some will criticize it, but there'll always be eyeballs on it. And I guess it's a way for that individual to be able to tell their side of the story. And everybody has a story.
Yeah.
And given how much she has been through, she's done so many different things throughout her life, not just the past campaign that she was involved in, which certainly was controversial, but she's also a former First Lady of the United
That's right.
States when her husband was president. And she's done so many things in her own right. And so it gives her a chance to tell her story, particularly this last race, which was just so very interesting and caught the attention of America.
Oh, yeah. And thus you have a book tour.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. That's
And then
right.
we have a president that comes up with silly tweets like he's hit her. That's one of the more recent ones. I don't know, he just never stops. Maybe, I don't know, maybe before we see the last of him, he will have learned how to be more presidential. But hey, go figure. And there's been comments on the fact that we had two prominent people, Lily Tomlin, who was actually from Detroit.
That's true.
Did you know she went to Hutchinson Elementary School?
I did not know she went to Hutchinson.
She
I
lived
think
on
I had heard that she had gone to Cass Tech
High school, right. And had lived on, I believe it was Woodrow Wilson.
Okay.
Some years ago, I went to see her at the Fisher Theater. They have their program and a little bio of the entertainment
Yes.
and entertainment, so the information was in that. There was someone. Who else was the other person? There was somebody else here with
Jane
her.
Fonda.
Oh yeah, Jane Fonda. So the complaint was that the two of them were pretending to be activists. I guess they go from being the haves to the have-nots. And they were in support, or are in support, of the income increase. Okay. Well, I don't have an issue with a prominent person endorsing something that is not in their arena. Of course, they command more than $15 an hour. But to understand the issue of lack of employment, the lack of income to sustain one is something that's necessary. But I didn't see these same conservatives complaining when Ronald Reagan decided to dip into politics. He's an entertainer just like Lily Tomlin, and or the governor of California, or Clint Eastwood, who became mayor, or Cher's husband, was it Sonny Bono? Anyway, it was just crazy to try and frame a conversation to cause people to think otherwise of Lily Tomlin, or a former Detroiter.
Right. Well, we're living in a very, very partisan country right now, and in many respects a partisan world. It's always probably been that way, but I think it's gone up several notches now. I think America used to be a little more tolerant of people's differing points of views, and now it's almost like you've got to be in one camp or the other camp, and people don't want to respect the fact that individuals will have a difference of opinion, and we can respectfully agree to disagree, and not use derogatory terms about people or try to castigate people into certain political groups when sometimes people might fit more in a conservative group, sometimes they might fit more in terms of a liberal opinion. And that's part of the beauty of this country, is the fact that we have had a difference of opinion and people from all walks of life. Certainly Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin are no strangers to the political world, particularly Lily Tomlin from all the comedy that she has done. And we all know that comedy oftentimes takes very real issues and sometimes comedians hit it in a very serious way and sometimes a very comedic way, and sometimes a blend of the two. And Jane Fonda, her activism goes as far back as the Vietnam War. And these are two people who have done well financially in their own lives, but they also have shown a sensitivity with the average American. And so they were expressing their point of view.
Yeah.
And the fact that they would take time to come to Detroit to advocate on an issue that they feel deeply about is something I think they should be commended for. Whether you agree with them individually or not, at least respect the fact that they care enough to be able to get out and talk about something that they don't have to do. And both of them have done very well in their own lives. They could just sit back in the comfort of their own homes and not worry about people who may or may not be less fortunate than themselves.
What have you researched or heard about St. Louis? I have a friend who is actually from St. Louis, and she was saying that the disturbances and arrests and all that are going on there have been going on for over a week, but it was not anywhere in the media.
Yeah, I have not heard much more than what's been reported in the general media. I was out of town this past weekend. As a matter of fact, my wife and I were laughing a little bit last night because we said, you know, we've been out of town. We've been sort of away from the television and stuff for a few days. And I looked at her and I said, that's not a bad thing, is it? And so she said, no, it felt kind of good. So now we're playing a little bit of catch up since last Thursday. But every so often you do have to take a little bit of break.
Yeah.
But to deal with a very serious issue in St. Louis, there has been tension there. And hopefully, you know, things will sort of simmer down and, you know, we won't have a very violent situation. But I think St. Louis is indicative of so many other American cities these days where there is tension, there is great concern over how African Americans have been treated, and the relationship between law enforcement and the average citizen. That's something that's been reported and reported widely.
Right.
Even though, you know, we've got to keep all of this hopefully in perspective. You know, while we have a police chief here that seems to be very involved with the community and at least talks with people, and you can at least access him, it's not the same everywhere in America. And we just recently had a member of the Detroit Police go take over the Dallas Police Department. And so Renee Hall is going to be there and be their leader. We'll see how she does. She certainly made a name for herself here and is kind of studied up under Chief Craig. But I see her on Facebook a lot, and she seems to be hitting the ground running, very involved in that community. And that's a community that, you know, just a little over a year or so ago, you know, had its own, you know, problems and tension. So
And
it
she's
can happen
African-American.
anywhere, anytime, and I think leaders have to be very, very sensitive to the needs of people and
Right.
respecting people's rights.
Well, she's an African American.
Yes, she
in
is.
Dallas, Texas. That's interesting. But here or there, I should say, in St. Louis, I was told that 13 people have been arrested, African Americans, then 20, and then last night 80. So the people are quite angered because the officer was acquitted from shooting
Yes.
another black man, shot in the back. And so much so that some have gone to the mayor's house and painted it red.
I saw that on the news last night.
Wow, yeah. So we're just, I don't know, I guess sometimes one of the only things you can do is pray that there is a change, because the violence is already out there. So that would be something left to do. Here in the state, I'm hearing that there is a move to try and, this is amazing if this happens, reduce the auto insurance, where the residents in the city of Detroit would benefit.
Well, there is this talk. and there's negotiation underway in Lansing. Now, those of us who've been in Michigan for a long time, auto insurance is one of those issues that gets up under the skin of a lot of people because of the high rates that we have here in this state.
Right.
And for so long, it was painted as a Detroit versus the rest of the state issue. And I think for the first time in perhaps a long time, we now see a move afoot to neutralize this as not just a issue that Detroiters are concerned about, that this is an issue that people all across the state are concerned with. And as we talk about trying to grow our cities, try to grow the state, particularly trying to get young people who oftentimes are educated here with the excellent universities that we have, but then oftentimes leave Michigan and take the fruits of their education other places, now trying to get them to come back, and many of them are starting to come back, which is good news. But auto insurance is one of those things that some of these young people and people who are not just young can't afford, and it's a big cut into their budget. But the Speaker of the House is working with Detroit Mayor Duggan. They seem to be on the same page in terms of approaching and coming up with a solution for auto insurance. The leader of the Michigan Senate, Mr. Meekhoff, is not on the same page, last we heard, with the leader of the House, yet they're both from the same political party. So sometimes you can have infighting within the party. And we were talking about it not too long ago on a show I was in Lansing, and everybody was trying to assess, well, where do you think this is going to lead? We don't know. It's too early to tell yet. I think the good thing is that there is conversation, there's negotiation, and there seems to be a desire, at least from the mayor of the largest city in Michigan and the leader of the Michigan House of Representatives, to carve out something that will be bipartisan, we hope, and that you can get through the legislature, which of course is controlled by Republicans right now, both on all branches and all levels of this state. So there's got to be negotiation. Democrats can't do it alone. Republicans can't quite do it alone. You've got to bring both parties to the table. I hope they can work something out, because people all across the state do need relief from
Well, the
high auto
elephant.
insurance rates.
Well, that's true, but it seems to me that the elephant in the room is racism, and there are not a lot of people who even want to talk about it. And it seems that if there is a desire to lure more whites into the city of Detroit, then it seems to me that that's one reason why this insurance issue is being discussed now to be reduced.
Well, that's certainly an interesting angle at looking at it, and one could certainly make that case that may be where the interest lies now in finally addressing the issue that Detroiters have been yelling and screaming about for years and years and years. And we do know enough about politics to know that sometimes we come up with strange bedfellows before something concrete gets done. We'll have to see how they work through these issues. We often times know, and if we suggest otherwise, then we have our head in the sand, that in a state and in a city, in a region like ours, in which you have so much diversity, and you have a large African American population, a large Arab American population, a large Jewish population. We have a little bit of everything. We're a true melting pot here. That race has oftentimes been that thorny issue and that elephant in the room, as you say, whether it's been auto insurance or it's been transportation, housing. But it's the challenge that we have to work with. And if we're going to make progress, then we got to deal with it, and we got to call it as we see it. But it doesn't, even though it's a challenge, it doesn't have to be an obstacle. It doesn't have to be something that stops us from making progress. Because when you get right down to it, regardless of what the issue is, we're a region competing against other regions across this country. And it's really not cities versus cities so much anymore. It's regions versus regions because of the economics. Few cities can do it by themselves anymore. They need, the other communities around them to be able to compete. It's the Atlanta region, it's the Cleveland region, it's the Chicago region that we're really competing with for jobs and all sorts of other things.
But see, when I hear the conversation about competition, that takes me back to 1998, 1999, and John Engler. John Engler was governor of the state of Michigan, as you know.
Yes.
And it was during that time that there was this easing into the school system, the public school system, and the elimination, slowly but surely, step by step, of the vocational classes and the other classes that cause students to really want to come to school and stay in school and get excited about things. For instance, young men would look forward to going to school for the wood carving or the metal shop or whatever it was. And then, of course, the added dessert for that would be music and sports, ROTC, that kind of thing. But as John Engler just eased on, it seemed to me that the concern was if we allow those students in Detroit to continue as they have been, the competition will multiply. Like that. Benjamin Davis Aerospace was one of the finest and actually the only school in the nation. We're talking high school here.
Right. Teach young
people
how
at
to
18.
fly.
At 18.
Yeah.
They come out of school with a pilot's license and don't have a driver's license. They could repair airplanes. They could become employed and make from $40,000 to $90,000 a year. With the continuation of Jennifer Granholm, who I really think was a Republican, and on to Snyder, it's not got any better. And I hear people in the media talking about, well, we got to educate all the children. Well, the children in Detroit get less money per student than children in other districts. More in the classroom. When they tell us that 25 kids, 30 kids, you can go past that, we have 45 and 50 kids in a classroom.
Yeah, it's very, very difficult
Yeah.
to teach when you have classrooms
Like
that
that.
large. That's a challenge for any teacher. I don't care how good you are.
Yeah.
You're testing the skills of that teacher, and the very best teachers would tell you that the smaller the class, the more engaged they can be, the more one-on-one time they can give the students, and that's really should be the goal for all of us. It's going to be very interesting, I think, to watch the next couple of years what happens with the Detroit public school system, of course the largest public school system in this state. That is now under new leadership with Superintendent Vitti, who's from this general area, having grown up here, who says he's excited about coming back here to a place that he has some roots in, who says he wants to really kind of shape and remold the school system and make it an effective and one of the best school systems in the country.
Did he talk about putting the vocational classes back in the school system?
I've not heard him talk specifically about that yet, but he's just sort of getting started on his overall plan. And I would imagine that that's coming down the line. And I've not personally heard him talk specifically about that. The interview I did with him a while back up in Mackinac, at that point, I think he was talking about some of the things that you talked about. He was interested in trying to figure out how he could reduce class size, making schools safe, making sure that teachers had all of the things that they needed to be able to be effective teachers, and to make sure that parents were involved with the education of the system. So it's going to be a tough job. It's a big system.
And
We've had a lot of challenges.
And it didn't have to be, but go ahead.
Yeah. So we're going to see what he does. He seems to be energetic. He has had Alicia Merriweather, who a lot of people liked, who a lot of the teachers wanted to have the #1 job as part of his team here. And
She's for
knows
charter
curriculum,
schools,
so,
John. She's for charter schools. How could that be?
well,
Anyway.
Well, we know that while that's certainly a debate that has been going on for a long time, we also know that it has become an integral part of the education system across America. At one time, we debated whether or not we should even have charter schools. Now the question is, well, should we have good charter schools mixed in with the good public schools, because there are so many, and Michigan has so many. So it's
there many
part of
outside
the
of
it's
Detroit?
as many. They're not nearly as
No,
many.
right.
Not nearly as many. No. So that's going to be one of the challenges. I wouldn't want his job, but then again, I'm not an educator
Yes.
by profession and by training. But hopefully, he will be successful with the goals and aspirations that he wants for the students, because it really is all about the students and preparing them for this big world that they're going to soon enter, and they're going to be our future leaders.
Yeah.
And so we want them to have the very best education, and we want them
Right.
to be able to compete on the same level as students from other school systems across the United States.
But you know, speaking of future leaders, that just makes me think about politics. And the politics around here is just getting out of hand. We have the Republicans who seem to have a lot of infighting going on a state level, national level. And when it comes to the Democratic Party, they've lost their mind. It is one. Oh, let me ask you this before I go into that. You familiar with the Port Authority?
Yes.
Have you interviewed any of the board members from the Port Authority?
Not recently. Not
Okay.
recently. I
Well,
think,
let me say this. For the last 3 years, they seem to have been dormant, and the catering company is getting over, how the folks say, like a fat rat in a peanut butter factory. They are leasing out the facility, and I guess depending on who they want to have an event there, they may tell you it'll cost you $20,000, $15,000, thereabouts. But the Port Authority for the last 3 years, and nobody seems to be able to give me a good reason why, there have been no ships to come into the Port Authority. Now, there's been one to stop at, the Rattlesnake, and another one at the other restaurant there, but not to the Port Authority. Now, this is the largest tourist destination in the state. When you come in on the ship, you dock. You can take your passport and go to Windsor, Canada. You come into the city of Detroit. You can see the African American Museum, the Science Center. You can go to Greenfield Village, casino, a number of things.
Sure.
You can even ride on a little dumb toy train that goes 7 miles an hour. Well, folks really need transportation. But not to have any ships dock here for the past 3 years, think about the amount of money the city of Detroit has lost because of that. Now, we went over Benjamin Davis Aerospace and a benefit to the high school graduates' income, taking care of themselves, their loved ones. The Port Authority could do the same thing. 2 programs. One, I think Traverse City is the location for the school that graduates officers and mechanics. And there is the tuition involved there. And there's another one in Maryland that deals with the tourists, the inner workers, on the ship. Now, from the one in Traverse City, when they graduate, they can make $75,000 a year. The one in Maryland is $60,000 a year. The past 3 years, none of it has been promoted. But somebody's supposed to be concerned about the education of the young people. And those two programs are not just for young folk in Detroit. It's, statewide. I guess if you come from Ohio, you could go too. But it's not been promoted at all. Even the Port Authority has what you might call foundation, which would provide monies for the students who want to enter the program in Maryland. It would cover their airfare, dormitory, uniforms, books. Why haven't they promoted that? Okay, now that brings me to politics. We have a person who is the chair of the 13th district who's on the board. Said nothing, not even at the 13th district meetings, which take place on the second Saturday of the month. Didn't say a word. Should know about it. Unfortunately, I'm assuming that Jonathan Kinlock, who is the chair of the 13th district, would know about those two programs that should come through the Port Authority. They've been dormant. So who is concerned about the education of our young people? Certainly not the person who's chair of the 13th district. We have 12 cities a part of the 13th district. That information could have been shared with them. I know that the program is not just, as I said, for Detroit students. But if you're talking about the next generations getting educated, getting trained, making an income, contributing to the tax base, contributing to the businesses, the economics, the overall economics of here, why aren't they promoting that or the Benjamin Davis aerospace program? I mean, nobody seems to be able to answer that, other than perhaps the bankruptcy might have had an impact. Oh, hey, money coming in. We can't say the city is broke, which it wasn't, but propaganda. So perhaps your producers might.
Well, those are good
wanna look
questions,
into
and
that.
we can certainly mention this to our investigative team and give them a chance to do their due diligence and see what they can find out. And that's how we get stories, and to the public that's listening out there. Oftentimes I'll be out and about, maybe at a grocery store and maybe somewhere else, and people will come up and say, well, how do we get stories that we're concerned about on the news? And I tell them there is no one set way to do it. There are multiple different ways in which we get the information that eventually gets out to you, and things that we look into. And this is one way. Is we're out and about in the community as much as we can be, and we hear from people such as yourself things that others are talking about that need to be looked into. Sometimes they check out, sometimes they don't. That old professor used to say reporting begins with what you know and ends with what you find out. And that's true. And
That's
sometimes, we get really good stories that come out of that, and sometimes we run up against a brick wall, and it turns out to be quote unquote what everybody says is fake news now.
Oh, Lord.
but in all
new
seriousness, when people have things that they want us to look into, call the station, write the station, send us emails. More people do emails than they do telephones these days.
What emails should they send? What is it? Request, concern? What
They
email?
They can call our news assignment desk at 248-827-9407. Once again, 248-827-9407. And that desk is manned pretty much 24/7. There's always someone there happy to take the information, and then they will filter it to the different producers and reporters. And then you can always go to our website at wxyz.com and when you go there, there's always a way to be able to submit ideas to us. And then some of the things take more time to develop than others. That's why we have our call for action unit, which really does some good digging into things. And oftentimes they will start the process before it even gets to some of our investigative reporters. They'll do some of that hard grunt work to find out, is there really a good story here? Is there really a problem here that needs to be addressed? And try to help resolve it. And then on the really good ones, they'll pass those along to our consumer reporters, our investigative reporters, and then they become stories that are on air. But the
And
call
then
for
you
action
would
staff,
report on it?
right.
you
And, sometimes they'll come to me, but more often than not, it's our general assignment reporters or our
Okay.
investigative reporters or the
Okay.
consumer reporters that really do it. If it's sort of money related, then a lot of times that's Joanne Purton with her the Save Your Money feature that she does, trying to always make sure that viewers aren't wasting their money. I think it's actually called Don't Waste Your Money. So we've got a pretty large staff, and everybody has their specialties. So there's many different ways in which we can address a particular story depending on what the story is and where it's at and what the issue is. But we just encourage people, write to us,
Right.
get the information to us, and we'll do our very best.
Yeah. Well, the reason why I bring up the issue of the Port Authority, it is because when you hear people talk about, I want to bring jobs. I heard, what's his name, the state attorney general, Schuette.
Bill Schuette.
The one that Donald Trump misspelled his name. Oh boy, that president. Anyway, he was talking about, I want to bring jobs. Well, how long have you been up there? And what have you been doing? They have access. They have an opportunity. He has an opportunity to reach out to people because of his position. People know who he is. If he calls them, they'll answer the phone. And so I suppose he only wants to bring jobs if he wins. You know how that goes. But getting back to the 13th district and the problems that they have is getting to be out of hand. There is an endorsement committee, but the board, the 13th district board, makes decisions, and it was told to the whole membership that when we make a decision, that's it. There will be no further action. We will not come to you to vote on anything. So recently, he tried to make endorsements, and he wanted to endorse a person for police commission who isn't even on the ballot. Not on the ballot. I mean, just total insanity. So it was called to his attention that this man not on the ballot. He works for Snyder. He's supposed to be a Democrat, but he works for Snyder. And not impossible, I guess. But anyway, so he had to back up and not endorse him. But those kinds of things make it difficult for the people to back the candidates in the Democratic Party when it comes to those running for governor, senator, state rep,
Well, it's going to be interesting to watch, I think, next year's elections as we head into 2018, because we've got gubernatorial election, a wide open race because there's no incumbency involved. Governor Snyder, by Constitution, cannot run again. We also.
I think that's a good idea, Greg.
Well, either way, he can't run again.
Yeah.
Now, unless somebody figures out how to quickly change the Constitution,
No,
which I don't think will happen.
Don't do that.
But it will be a wide open race, and in just watching politics for years, the American people, from state to state, seem to like change, and things sort of take that turn. After one party has been in office for a certain period of time, they generally like to see it flip to the next party. Not always, but it seems to happen like that
Well, here in
on
our
a pretty
state,
frequent
yeah,
basis.
yeah.
Republicans have been in control of the state for quite some time now, and so the Democrats will have an opportunity to win it back, but they've got to convince the people that what they want to do is in their best interest.
Well, let
And
me-
even with what you see happening on the national level, with President Trump getting elected and all the various controversies surrounding his administration, you would think in many respects, oh boy, it's going to be Democrats can really take advantage of this. But there are people, when you talk to a lot of Democrats, they're great concern that that there's disarray even within the Democratic Party, and who is the next wave of leadership coming from within the Democratic Party, and who will challenge
That's
President Trump if indeed, you know,
Yes,
he
oh, Lord,
runs again 3
please
years from
don't
now.
tell
So it's not necessarily a slam dunk for Democrats on the national level. It's not necessarily a slam dunk for Democrats on the state level. And you mentioned Bill Schuette, who many people feel has been running for that top job for a long time in one form or another. So he does have some name recognition. But you got Gretchen Whitmer. You got a lot of people in there. A lot of political wannabes. We'll have to see.
That's true. Well, if he
emerges to the top.
if he indicts Snyder, he may have a better chance. But in the meantime, I believe that there are Republicans pretending to be Democrats, the same as Dillon did. Was Andy Dillon from Redford? He ran as a Republican several times, could not get elected. So he decided that he'd pretend to be a Democrat, and they voted him in. When Snyder became governor, guess what? He said bye. Left Redford, went to Lansing, and became treasurer.
But you know, I think one thing that we may see happening in America right now is I think people are starting to grow a little tired of political labels. And I think that was one of the reasons Donald Trump was able to get elected, is that he wasn't really Republican and he wasn't really Democrat in many respects.
But he was a racist.
But he was able to hit a chord with issues that a lot of people were very concerned with.
Yes.
And a wide number of people who maybe had not been traditional voters, and they came out of the woodworks and voted for him. You know, even with you know, entertainers now jumping into the political arena or teasing with the idea of jumping into political arena. They aren't necessarily Democrats, they aren't necessarily Republicans. Many of them haven't been aligned with either party for any great length of time. And I think that's why we also see a lot of people, you know, the president doesn't get good ratings, but neither does Congress. Okay? So the American people, I think, to a great extent, they're sick of everybody. And they oftentimes feel as though neither party has effectively represented them. And so we are living in an era in which politicians are not very popular these days.
And he did go to the highways and the byways and out in the rural areas, and he stirred up folk, and they got excited because somebody came to the barn dance.
That's
but,
true.
A member of Hood Research was saying recently that the objection that he has to the Democratic Party is they are not looking within the southeastern part of the state of Michigan for a candidate to run for governor. If the population, the largest population, as you mentioned earlier, is in the southeastern part of the state, Detroit in particular, but the southeastern part of the state, so why would they not look for a candidate from this area to run for governor?
It's a good question. I mean, this has traditionally been the Democratic base. But with things sort of changing, as I mentioned before, with political labels, I imagine there are going to be some who say, well, I may live over in Grand Rapids or the west side of the state, but I'm concerned about issues that everybody should be concerned with.
Yeah.
And so they give it a try. Now, that's not been traditionally the Democratic stronghold. It has been more in, as you said, Southeast Michigan. But even look at someplace like Oakland County. Look at how Oakland County has been changing over the last 10 years or so. And it's probably goes back even longer than that, but we're really starting to see the demographics changing, especially in South Oakland County. It's becoming, Oakland County is quote unquote becoming much more kind of Democratic. It's still a lot of Republicans in Oakland County, but it's not that absolute lock for Republicans that it once was, during the
the
days
L.
of
Brooks
Bill
Patterson
Broomfoot and
team.
L. Brooks Patterson. So, and even L. Brooks is very quick to acknowledge that Oakland County has changed politically. So, just as Macomb has changed, and many people say Macomb appears to be getting more conservative in the way that Oakland County used to be. So things are, nothing stays the same, and it's changing. So
There was a
those
song
who
about
want
that.
to be the next elected leaders, they have to look at all this, and they have to do their research, as Hood Research does research, and they have to look at the demographics and the issues and figure out where will the next leaders come from, and what will they be advocating for?
L. Brooks Patterson is advocating a change in the insurance. Unfortunately, it had to be after he and his driver were in such a
It was unfortunate.
serious automobile accident. He didn't get it until it happened to him.
Yeah, and Brooks is quick to admit that. I mean, some people like L. Brooks, some people don't like him, but one thing most folks can
he
say
did.
is that he's always
He did
he's
try
always
to turn
spoken
over the
his
school.
mind.
He did
Yeah.
try to turn over the school bus now.
And then that's one of those long old issues that certainly everybody who's been around for a long period of time remember. But as you said, sometimes it takes a personal experience for someone to change their opinion or change their attitude on something or be sensitized to an issue. And certainly the accident that he went through, he's very quick to say to you, I had to go through a bad situation, and so he's on that same side of the fence that a lot of people, Democrats, have been on before. So it's going to be interesting to see how all this evolves. It'll be interesting to see how transportation evolves in this region. We're talking about a new team put together here to try to win more businesses to Southeast Michigan. And one of the things that Google and others are telling them is transportation is important. So now all of a sudden it's like, whoa. Maybe we better kick into gear here, or we may
Yeah.
not have a chance for some company that's going to bring 500,000 jobs in here.
The one thing that I thought was positive that Snyder was trying to promote, and that was rapid transit by bus, not by a dumb toy train. And the question that I have now, the catastrophic fund, which L. Brooks Patterson is able to benefit from, and his driver, do you have a lot of information on that? Do you think that these top insurance companies are going to be able to walk away with that money and divide it among themselves?
I think this issue will be like so many other issues, that anytime you have lobbyists and anytime you have companies that have a vested interest in something, they're going to do what we all do, Theo. We circle the wagons and we fight for those things that are most important to us, especially if it's something that affects our bottom line. And so this is not going to be an easy fight with insurance companies. They're going to have to bring the insurance companies to the table, and this will be part of the tough negotiations, because they're going to have to say, well, what's in it for us if we renegotiate or we change how we're doing insurance in this state. And it's going to be up to Mayor Duggan and Speaker Leonard and Senate Majority Leader Meekhoff and the governor to figure out how to carve this up in a way that everybody feels as though they're walking away with a win and doing what's best for the people of this state. And that's not an easy thing. You know politics. It can be very, very ugly
That's
in the
billions.
making of legislation. But if there's a strong will and a desire in the people who are doing the serious negotiation, if they're truly committed to serving the people, then there's usually a way of being able to do it. But it has to be, there has to be a will there. There has to be a way. And most importantly, they have to hear from the people. You know, politicians do their greatest amount of work when they believe people are watching and people are telling them what they want, and they believe as though they're being watched and watched closely. And I think they want to hear from the people as well. Oftentimes, we don't let them know what we're thinking, and we don't come out in masses sometimes. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. And sometimes we become too apathetic, or we become so frustrated with the system that we say, I'm powerless anyway, so
They're going to
what
do what
difference
they
does-
want to do.
they're going to do what they
They
want.
have that little saying
And
out
when
there.
that happens, then in a sense, we're really giving them the power to do what,
To
they,
do what
want,
they want.
as opposed to saying it should be from the bottom up. You should always be there to serve the people, because the people are the ones who put you in office, and the people can also take you out of office.
Now, this runoff, oh my God, are you kidding me? Oh, man. We didn't get a chance to talk about this water runoff feed that's totally insane. We, 2 minutes, oh my goodness. You have some parting thoughts that you want to share with us?
You know, I think we're living in a very, very interesting time. And I was telling someone the other day is hopefully people pay close attention, because we're really watching history be made right now. You know, historians years from now will write about what we're talking about and witnessing every single day now. We've not seen anything quite like what we see going on, not just statewide, nationally, but internationally. You know, look at the tension, you know, what North Korea is attempting to do, the United Nations and relationships there. There's so many question marks out there right now that are going to affect our children that are coming up. And I think the bottom line is, what kind of world are we leaving to our
Yes.
children coming up?
So that-
And hopefully a better world than what we're currently living in.
Well, that says to me, what can we do today to make tomorrow better? At the end of our program, I like to say to those who tuned in, it's not necessary for you to know everything. What is necessary is for you to know how to find what you need when you need it. And we at Hood Research seek out as much information as we can to help us all make better informed decisions. And we have enjoyed having you here this
It's
morning.
been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for asking me to come in.
Oh, yes. And you will come again?
I'll be happy to come again.
Yes, and share with us some of your, insights of all of the newsmakers that you have an opportunity to
Which
interview.
I wish I had all the answers. I don't. My profession is one where we ask questions, we seek answers, and sometimes we get them, and sometimes we just get a lot of question marks.
Right, but it gives those who tune in something else to think about, and something to help them to weigh and figure out what's in the balance and what they should do.
Happy to
All
do
right.
so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tune in again next week. And
If you want to be nothing, do nothing. But the only problem with doing nothing is you never know when you're finished.
all right, tune in again next week. Peace.